When you think of species in Star Wars that have a dark side to them, you probably don't think of Jawas. But if you think that means Jawas don't have a dark side, you'd be wrong. Jawas are ruthless little buggers, and they've got a dark history that most other species can't even come close to matching. That's right, this video isn't clickbait at all. There is indeed a dark truth to the Jawas. Two of them in fact. In this video, we'll be taking a look at both of them.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
A lot of the Jawas' dark side stems from their history, which is as good a place as any to start. The Jawas actually evolved fairly recently compared to many other species. While the average major species in the Star Wars galaxy reached a recognizable evolutionary stage tens of thousands of years before the Republic was even an idea, the Republic actually predates the existence of the Jawas as a species. That's because the evolution of the Jawas was affected by outside forces, requiring drastic changes. You see, Tatooine wasn't always a desert. As a Zerka Corporation starport officer once remarked to Revan, the planet was ancient compared to most, and 30,000 years before the events of the movies, the planet was lush and boasted an advanced civilization. Tatooine in those days was dominated by tropical climates, mostly warm oceans and low-lying forested islands. Long before most other worlds, the planet developed sentient life, a humanoid species known as the Kumamga. The Kumamga, by chance or perhaps by celestial design, resembled humans, and they built a great, technologically advanced civilization on Tatooine. They stripped much of their world, covering its continents with great metal cities that gleamed fiercely in the light of the planet's twin suns. Eventually, they developed spaceflight and set out to colonize the stars. This was against the wishes of the elders of their species, however, who warned that daring to touch the stars would bring doom to the whole planet. The elders of the Kumamga were right. Their fledgling spacefaring civilization attracted the attention of another, even older species, the Rakata of the Infinite Empire. The Rakata, as they did with all species that they encountered, enslaved the Kumamga, abducting their leaders and taking their strongest workers to be put to use making monuments across the galaxy. They stripped Tatooine of its technology, harvesting entire cities for scrap metal for use in their ever-expanding empire. This was near the end of the Infinite Empire's time, however, around a few hundred years before its collapse, and by this point it was already beginning to weaken. The Kumamga, like many species under the Infinite Empire's thrall at the time, sought to escape slavery at the hands of the Rakata. And so they rebelled, the first of many species to do so. The Kumamga set the machines they were made to work to destroy themselves, and those that were left on Tatooine fought back against the handful of Rakata that were stationed there and their battle droids. They drove the Rakata from Tatooine entirely, a victory that, a few thousand years earlier, would have been inconceivable. But unfortunately for the Kumamga, their victory didn't last long. Unlike the later rebellions, which took place on many worlds simultaneously, the Kumamga rebellion was the only major threat the Infinite Empire faced at the time, and so it was able to respond in force. The Rakata, unwilling to waste the resources needed to retake Tatooine, decided to glass the planet. As the Kumamga hid in deep caves, the Infinite Empire bombed Tatooine into oblivion, boiling away its oceans and destroying all life on the surface, rendering the planet a glassy wasteland. The Rakata left Tatooine alone after that, and the Infinite Empire fell not long after. Over the course of the tens of thousands of years that followed, the glass left behind from the bombardment ground down into sand. The Tatooine we all know and love, a barren, unforgiving desert, was the result. And once this change had taken place, the Kumamga emerged from their caves, once more reclaiming the surface of their world. But the years in darkness had not been all that kind to them. Indeed, the Kumamga proper no longer existed. They had diverged into two different species. The Gorphers, who would later be known as the Sand People of the Tusken Raiders, were more akin to their ancient ancestors, but they had become primitive, superstitious, and warlike. The Jawas, on the other hand, had become smaller, weaker, and rat-like. Both species quickly worked out ways to deal with the heat of the desert. The Jawas began using hooded cloaks, which diffused heat from the suns and helped keep them cool, similar to the methods discovered by the Sand People. The Jawas only ever left their hands uncovered, at least while outside, and even their faces were shielded by black felt veils. They used colored gemstones set into those veils as primitive goggles to see through, which gave the appearance of glowing eyes beneath their hoods. Usually yellow, but occasionally red or orange. Their real eyes, for the record, were darker and, well, rat-like. But the dark side of the Jawas' history doesn't end there. Despite their common heritage, the Jawas clashed with the Tuscans from the start. Resources on Tatooine were now scarce, and neither species believed the planet could sustain both of them. The Jawas, however, were unable to really do anything about their Tuscan enemies, the ones they called the Ghosts of the Sand. The Tuscans enslaved the Jawas whenever they could find them, and the first few thousand years after their re-emergence were rather miserable for the Jawas. Around 5000 BBY, change came to Tatooine once more. There was a great space battle above the planet, fought between unknown belligerents, and the clash rained hunks of metal down into the sands. In this, the Jawas saw their chance. They scavenged what fell from orbit and adapted the technology that survived to suit their needs, attempting to get an advantage over the Tuscans. They were only moderately successful until, for the first time in tens of thousands of years, outsiders set foot on Tatooine once more. In the time of the Old Republic, Tatooine was considered more or less cursed. Geological surveys often indicated the planet was rich in metals, but these surveys were often off, and what metal any miners found was always flawed. For some cause or another, the metal found on Tatooine was all corrupted. It corroded extremely quickly and was virtually useless as a result. Tatooine was settled, abandoned, and resettled many times over the course of the Sith Wars, with some colonists even settling on the exact same spots. Anchorhead, for example, was settled at least 3 times. Each time Tatooine received colonists, the Jawas saw a glimpse of hope. Each time, they reached out to the outsiders and traded with them, seeking to acquire their technology to use against the Tuscans. This was rather difficult. The Jawas communicated with each other through a mixture of sound and scent, and they had to adapt their language to be able to communicate with non-Jawas. Even then, their trade language was notoriously difficult to understand even for droids. Some Jawas even sought to make the colonists their allies. Unlike the Jawas, the Sand People detested the outsiders, especially humans, who they believed resembled their ancient abducted. The outsiders reminded the Sand People of the crimes they held against their ancestors to have committed against the planet, and the way the miners ripped up the desert made them even angrier. The Sand People went to war against any colonists that arrived, harassing their mining convoys and stealing their weapons for use against them. The Jawas helped the colonists against the Sand People as best they could, but they were usually out of luck whenever the colonists abandoned the planet. The most significant addition to Jawa culture came when Circa Corporation claimed Tatooine during the Jedi Civil War. Circa sought to strip mine the entire planet, and to do so, they brought in sandcrawlers, massive mining machines that tore up swaths of the desert looking for metal. The Sand People attacked the sandcrawlers constantly, slaughtering their crews and leaving them damaged and burning out in the Dune Sea. When Zerka eventually left the planet, they didn't take many of those sandcrawlers with them. They left them to rot in the desert, thinking nothing of it. But where Zerka saw a wasted investment, the Jawas saw salvation. They laid claim to the sandcrawlers and they effectively rebuilt their entire culture around them. Their sandcrawlers became moving fortresses, homes in which they could be safe from the Tuscan raiders. When permanent settlements were finally founded on Tatooine years later, the Jawas gave the sandcrawlers another purpose as well. Their habit of scavenging technology suddenly had become profitable, and so they began using the sandcrawlers as mobile workshops, collecting and repairing scrap they found in the desert to trade to settlers with. But there's another dark truth to the Jawas outside of their history. You see, the Jawas eventually came to depend on their junk trade, and as the years wore on and times got better for them, they began to get bolder. By the time of the Galactic Civil War, it wasn't at all unheard for Jawas to outright steal droids or other important equipment from moisture farmers or other settlers and then sell them back at inflated prices. If something wasn't under immediate guard, the Jawas considered it liable to be claimed. If something was under immediate guard, the Jawas would still occasionally consider it liable to be claimed, one way or another. So that's the dark truth about the Jawas, who you might have seen more recently in The Mandalorian, which we highly recommend. But as per usual, what do you think? Are there any other species you'd like to see us cover like this next? Make sure you let us know in the comments section below. And just before you go guys, there's a whole bunch of links in the description below waiting for your clicks. So if you want to join the wider Geetsly's community on our Geetsly's gaming network, where we have our Clone Wars and Imperial server and our Dark RP server coming up, or our Roblox server where you can play Clone Wars as well, then make sure you check out those links below. And if you also want to chat with other Star Wars fans, then we also have our main Geetsly's Discord where you can do just that. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you in the next video.